Welcome to the final episode of Students in Distress.
In this episode, we'll discuss some remaining comments from the questionnaires and some other topics that have not yet come up. Welcome back. Welcome to this last episode of Students in Distress. In this episode, we'll dive a bit deeper into the questionnaire that we did. That means that we will discuss your replies, your struggles, and the advice that you gave, and also advice that some study advisors gave. We still want to make disclaimer that this is not in any way professional. This is from you, for you. So let's go into it.
Yay! It was a long journey, by the way. Arriving at this point through sifting through all the advice, interviews, etc. But I think it's nice
that we made it.
Exactly. We talked to a lot of people. We also structured.
But it's also, we are doing this because we felt during the conversations with the guests, sometimes the comments that you gave just didn't come up, and they're nice discussing anyway. Yes. Having said that, we won't be able to discuss everything.
True.
We have a document with struggles.
A lot. You guys made sure to add a lot of input, and we're very grateful for that.
Thank you.
This episode is the chance to actually include your voices here as well, even though we couldn't interview everyone
maybe it's
that wanted to participate. Yeah,
maybe it's nice to give some insight in what you answered, what is the most common struggles, because we actually have gathered some statistics, and then we can get into your personal comments. So we found that of our respondents, which were 20, 16 answered that they struggle with mental health problems, which could be loneliness, stress, depression, etc. So 80%. Then 9 out of 20, so 45%, is struggling with practical things inside university, such as presenting, planning, dropping out. And the same amount, so 9 people, is struggling with practical things outside university, such as housing, uncertainty, etc. Then 30%, which are 6 people, are struggling with social life, and then 4 people struggle with other things, and there are also apparently 4 people that don't struggle with anything.
Shout out.
Which is great.
To everyone that's not struggling with.
So shall we start by mentioning some mental health struggles?
Yes.
Do you have any favorite comments? Do you have a comment of which you think, oh, I really recognize this?
Well, there was one about exam seasons, depression, which was, I experienced that every time there's, the exam season starts. So I was like, oh, wow. So I'm not the only one feeling this. So there was this student that says, one of my tendencies is to isolate myself in order to study during stressful phases, which increases loneliness additional to stress. Mm-hmm. And honestly, that spoke to me a lot, because during exams, you always feel like, okay, I have to do this, and there's never enough time. But at the same time, you isolate yourself so much that you also start missing social interaction, and there's the stress for the exam, but there's also the stress for, okay, but I'm not socializing, I feel bad in that way as well.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you experience that, or maybe not really?
actually for me it's quite different.
Okay.
Because I am more stressed in the beginning of any semester, because then I try to plan everything, I try to make a scheme and overview of everything I need to do, and then I think, oh my gosh, it's so much that I need to do. And to hold on to your planning is quite difficult in the beginning, because it's so much you need to do, and there are different courses, new courses, you need to get into everything. So that is the moment when I'm stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And when the exam weeks are coming up,
Mm-hmm.
then I feel like, okay, now it's just a test left. I have done everything I could do. Now I feel a bit at peace.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the stress is at the beginning, and at the end, I am quite relaxed, which is
Wow.
a bit unique, perhaps. But
There
yeah.
was one other comment that actually, like said kind of the opposite of you, where like they need pressure. Like, so they say stress usually comes and goes depending on the deadline. It's a bit contradicting. I need a deadline in order to feel enough pressure to do stuff, but sometimes this pressure is too much to handle by yourself. And I also get that, because if you have no deadline, you can postpone stuff or not feel too much, but then suddenly everything, like when the deadline actually comes and you know a certain date, then suddenly all of those stuff start appearing.
Yeah. I think I do feel this pressure, but then in a different moment, I feel it at the beginning when I know I have nothing done yet, which makes sense because you're just starting. But then I feel I need to do so much. And then that gives me pressure to get started, which also makes that I'm stressed in the beginning. I feel the stress, which makes me work very hard in the beginning of semester, maybe a bit too hard. And that's why there's less work left at the end. But there is a stressful period. It's not that I'm relaxed the entire semester. It's just a different
kind of deadline. Like you,
Yeah.
you're not during the last week cramming everything in.
Yes. So yeah, that different experiences, which is also interesting.
Yes. In regard to exam life, there was also one student that said they were struggling with living a balanced life, which is also a little bit with what we're talking about right now, where they say that in exam period, there is barely any social life outside of studying with friends. Which, what do you think about actually studying with friends when there's exam season and you can organize study groups? Do you think that's helpful for you, or do you...
Studying with friends, I think that's very helpful. I like it a lot. I actually did that from the beginning, from my first year bachelor. We had a lecture, and then I asked some friends to book a group studio at the university library, and then we just every week tried to discuss the lecture that we had. And we just noticed that in the end that was very helpful, because then we already knew the literature, the topics and everything, which made us feel prepared for the exam, and that maybe also helped to make me feel more relaxed, because every week you're working on it, on the course. But I have to say, it does add a lot to your to-do list. So in the weeks you're quite busy, but it does help. It does help. For me, it helped. How about you?
Well, I usually prefer to isolate myself, which is maybe where the problem comes from. But yeah, I feel like if I'm with someone, then I can't concentrate super much.
Yeah, I just think that are different ways of studying, which are both fine.
It's very individual.
Yeah.
It varies.
Yeah. Because when I'm then in an exam and I have a question about a certain topic, and then I read it and I think, oh, wait, we discussed this. Me and my friend.
Really?
And then I try to remember the conversation we had.
So it does help.
It does help, yeah, absolutely. There's one other mental health comment which I thought was interesting.
Yes.
There's so much information and options available that making any decision almost feels like the wrong one. And there's another one who mentions, I panic every time I think about my future. Partly I think that's interesting because we talked about that with Janet, and also because I recognize it, because I often find myself, what am I gonna do after my studies? So it's kind of comforting as well that other students have the same feeling sometimes, and that it's okay to feel it, I guess.
Yes. I mean, it's so contradicting though, because there's also this super big amount of information where the students feel lost. But at the same time, like some of the comments also said there's no information. I can't find the information, and this inability to find the information you're looking for might also stem from the fact that there's so much information.
Yeah, could be. I think maybe now this information could also be information about what you can do in the future, like your options, for example, because the thing with university is also it's so broad sometimes. You do not study for a real... No, you do not study for a real job. I was about to say that's not true,
Well,
but not a specific job. That's what I meant.
mhm.
So I think that's what they mean. But what you say is also true, that there's a lot of information, but still sometimes it's hard to find what you're looking for.
Yeah. For example, there's this one student, it was more about looking for information about Erasmus, but since exchange periods are also a big part of the degrees in our university as well, and in this context, you have to be very proactive about finding information yourself. There's this one student where they said they tried with 3 teachers to get informed on the opportunities Erasmus brings. They said how I became aware of Erasmus in the first few months of my master's, and I read that you should apply 5 months in advance. It turned out this was not necessarily the case for me, and I had the opportunity to apply up until 3 weeks before the start of my internship, but I was informed of this a few days before I left the Netherlands. I would say advertising which resources are available is something the university can still work on.
What do you think about that?
Since I've also done an exchange and I'm in the process of doing an exchange now for my master's again as well, I think it's very nice that someone also mentioned this, that it's very hard for me as well. I had to contact quite a lot of people and sometimes it's not everyone's aware, or there are different faculties, and it's sometimes a bit hard to find information as well. So I think definitely, I know someone that's also working on compiling kind of documents or information that can be made more accessible to students, which is very nice. But I think, yeah, sometimes you have to be very proactive. And if you reach out to them, then you might find out that, as this person says, maybe it's not necessarily true that you had to be 5 months early. And sometimes you can arrange stuff later if you're proactive.
Yeah. I agree that it is also sometimes hard to find information. For example, every year I try to find the academic calendar, and then I just need to Google.
Same,
and
I Googled it.
And then I come to a page and it's not the one that I'm looking for with all the colors or from last year. And I also struggle to find the exam regulations. So I just end up Googling it, and then still sometimes I just need to end up on the right page after 5 clicks or something.
Yes, exactly. I think it's very weird how we both needed to Google actually instead of finding it on the website, because on the website sometimes it's so hard.
Yeah.
Should we maybe also mention how recently with Janet we also tried finding some information about contact details?
Yes, I think that's interesting because she has a very nice page, as we mentioned, about diversity and well-being and
inclusion.
Thank
on the
you.
University website.
Yes, and so we just wanted to include that quickly, but then she didn't have it at hand, and then after the recording we tried to find it, and it was so hard.
Yeah, like all 3 of us kept even like either Googling or trying like on the website itself, like finding the exact link, and it was so hard. Like it's very inaccessible. And
so I agree that is something that the university still can work on. Maybe we can also mention how we found study advisors to email, because it's very relevant for the listeners, I think, to know how you can find study advisors.
Yes. So how many were there? I think there were 30.
I don't remember. I do know how many replied, but I don't know how many we actually contacted.
There were quite a lot.
Yeah, but what I did in order to find them is actually I just Googled study advisors RUG, RUG, and then it's actually the first one.
But sometimes the results vary as well.
Yeah,
so
and then you can see per faculty who the study advisors are. So you can find it. But the question then is how easy it is to book an appointment, for example.
Yes. I think that was kind of one of the also main struggles as well, because a lot of the advice that our study advisors gave, like in their responses, was that you should be early, and like whenever you feel like you want to contact someone, you should contact them.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, we have to mention that sometimes all the hours are booked quite in advance. So sometimes you need to wait a lot of time, and that could be discouraging to students.
Yeah, so if you feel that you need help, just try to be in time, I guess. Yeah. That's not very helpful.
No, but I mean, there was also the advice that if you have a student mentor, for example, or someone other contact from the university, it would still be nice to keep in touch or maybe mention this, so at least someone knows.
Yeah, but I think sometimes they also have like these, but it's for, I don't know if it's every faculty, but in our faculty they have these hours where you can just walk in for
I think for hours it's only by appointment.
Okay.
Which is sometimes makes it harder.
Yeah, but I think you should at least try and look at their schedule and see whether you can make an appointment.
Yes.
Give it a go.
And if they're not out of office.
So, are there any other themes that we want to discuss? There's actually one that I wanted to give some attention to. Because we are now discussing like the general themes, and that's also how we found our guests. But there are also some other things mentioned that could also be interesting, but they didn't make it to the episodes because they are a bit specific.
Yes.
So one of them is a person with schizoaffective disorder. And of course, that can also be a struggle. So I just wanted to give some attention to that as well.
Yes.
So the comment they wrote is, I have a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, which is essential schizophrenia with a related mood element. And though it is much less severe than I was younger, it still demands attention and consideration when balancing it with university and other aspects of life. For example, having a flare-up of hallucinations can make lectures and meetings challenging. And there was also somebody who was actually a single mother.
Yes.
Just because we have not mentioned it doesn't mean that it's not valid in any way.
I think that, we can't really box in all of the submissions into these broader themes and categories. Everyone's situation is very specific, very different. And this podcast is just one very small way of just getting people's voices heard and giving some platform.
Yeah, and also to other people listening
that are struggling with this stuff as well.
Yeah, also, but also people that, like, if you're listening to this podcast, knowing this exists and that some people are struggling with this, just remember to always be nice to other people, because you don't know
what
they're going through. So try to have like an open mind. I think that can be really, really helpful.
Yes.
Shall we go into the advice?
One last thing maybe I wanted to just mention is that a lot of students did mention how they are struggling with communication as well.
True.
And even though we can't directly help everyone like ourselves, I think just reading out some of the comments would be useful to also anyone else listening, that they also know other students are struggling with the same thing. So about communication, one of the comments was, thesis supervisor can't be reached. He doesn't respond to emails. This makes me extremely anxious and stressed. Another comment was the following. Due to a problem with teaching staff, a course is switched from period 1B to 2A, and this has as a result that I needed to work on my thesis in period 1B and 2B, skipping 2A. Or, as I'm doing now, do thesis next to 3 courses in block 2A. I told the teachers this, but they did not respond, and the conclusion is I need to work extra hard on my thesis in period 2B. And there's also this comment where they say, struggle with teachers who are not working with me. So I think all of these comments kind of also illustrate sometimes the administration is, hard, and for everyone, since there are a lot of students here, sometimes it doesn't go as planned or easy. And sometimes also the thesis can be very stressful, where you have to communicate with a lot of people and like supervisors and stuff like that, and not everyone has the time to pay attention to every student like in a very long way. So I mean, I think it's a struggle on both ends, both students and professors, especially when they, for example, I know some professors that have to supervise like a big number of students in the
Yeah.
same block. So
Yeah.
I think it would just be nice.
Yeah, that really requires a bigger change. There's nothing, at least
We can
not,
do about it.
No,
No,
as an individual.
but it's
Yeah.
just for anyone listening to know
Yeah.
you're not alone. Maybe there are
Yeah.
other people that there are
Yeah.
other people that are struggling with communication as well.
There was actually one professor that once said, you should state really clearly what you want from me in the title of your email, because then I know what it is about, I know what to do, and then I can schedule accordingly, and then you'll get a faster response. So maybe that will help a bit.
Yeah, and for example, in my internship, we're also talking to one professor, and I just saw their inbox, and it was like, every minute like there was a new
Exploding.
email. Yes, and then everything made sense to me. I was like, oh, okay, now I get why if I don't get a response immediately, I get why that is. Because it's so overwhelming. Like for me, it was overwhelming just seeing like stuff pop out, notifications on the screen. But imagine what it is like responding to every individual case.
Yeah, I can imagine. There's actually one last struggle that I thought might be interesting to talk about, because it comes up quite frequently, and those are struggles with regard to procrastination and planning. So just wanted to ask, we talked a bit about it, but how do you do that?
Planning
And handling,
I don't
tackling procrastination.
Oh my god, it's so hard. I mean, sometimes I try to be like, okay, I can't do anything today, even though the deadline is coming. And sometimes I just really leave it to the last moment, because otherwise the burnout is extreme. But there's these days where you stress about, okay, I have so much stuff to do, but then you cannot start it. And even though you've had this whole day without doing anything, you're stressed, and like the whole day has just like passed in stress, and you're like, oh my god, this was an awful day, but you have not done absolutely anything.
I have those days as well.
Right? And I might as well just rested today, but then I was stressing about all the stuff. And sometimes you just start and you're like, no, I cannot. It's very overwhelming at some points. But in planning in general, I have everything on my calendar on my phone. So that is nice for keeping track of gatherings, events, and the courses deadlines as well. But it's never a linear process. What about you? How are you?
Well, actually, I'm just in the beginning of each block, I'm downloading all the syllabi.
Yes.
Just going through the deadlines, putting them into my school diary.
Yeah.
And actually, I have one notebook, and I have my normal school diary. And I use the school diary for deadlines or for lectures when they are. And everything that I need to do, I put in another notebook. And I do it per week. Like every week I take a moment and I write down the to-dos, and I tick boxes so I can cross them off.
It's very, pleasing. Just doing the crossing, right?
Sometimes when you have done something and it was not originally a tick box, then you just add them
to
and
cross
them off.
Exactly, yeah. I've done that too.
Yeah, that's so nice.
Liberating. Yeah.
And sometimes, it's never exactly the same as I plan it. I always move around stuff and... Yeah, but that notebook really helps me to keep track of my tasks. And also, if I have many different courses, I use one color for each different course, like a marker.
Oh, okay.
And then I have in my school diary, I have these color for that particular lecture, and then in my to-do notebook for the same course, I use the same color, so I can see what belongs together. Okay. Sometimes I spend more time planning than actually doing things.
Well, but at least it gives you some sense of, control and structure. So
I think that's also mainly it, that you feel like, okay, I am in control now. At least that's what you hope.
You're trying.
I'm trying. It's a way of trying to keep the overview. Yeah. So that's how I do it. But sometimes it's hard to do everything that you planned.
Yeah.
It's still an ongoing process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can never be like master everything to perfection. So
Yeah. And also one thing that I found has really helped me is to write down the to-dos for the following day already. Because if I do, sometimes I feel like, oh, I don't want to write down my to-dos for tomorrow. I don't know, I'm tired. But then when I wake up in the morning and I feel like I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then my startup of the day is so much slower than when I have it ready. Like my to-dos are ready. I know what to do. Yeah. So that really helps. Because if I need to think of my to-dos in the morning, then
you're just not gonna do them.
No.
Yeah, you're just gonna have a stress day.
Yeah, then those are the days that you're like stressed, doing nothing and not get any rest.
Exactly.
Have you seen that meme with watching Netflix, knowing I should do other stuff?
Oh yeah.
And then thinking about the other stuff, watching Netflix stressed.
Yes. Yeah. It's like
that's the feeling.
It's like I haven't relaxed in any way, you know. Like I'm just watching it stressed. Yeah, procrastination, but you know that.
Yeah. But there was actually one comment that said, sometimes I watch Netflix and it's okay. Yeah, something like that.
Like, yeah, I have it in front of me. I tell myself that it's okay to do nothing and just watch Netflix. And like, that's probably the best advice we've had in the entries.
It's okay.
Yeah, honestly, we all do that.
Yeah. So if you're watching Netflix while listening to this podcast, which is a bit unpractical, then it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
A bit inconvenient though.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit hurt, but it's okay, you know.
I think this is a nice little bridge to the actual advice.
Well,
watch
I mean,
Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, we can honestly just end it here.
That's it.
But for anyone that wants a little bit more, I mean, there was this one comment that said, do all the things you might be afraid of, join a music group, talk to people, pursue your interests, and don't try to please other people. Which I think is very nice, that sometimes we kind of, either for events or social life, sometimes we may want to do something else, but we feel forced to interact and then go out when we don't want to and might feel tired. So sometimes it's better to just listen to yourself.
There's also here one comment that it's not exactly the same, but it's a bit about doing what you want to, but also not feeling the pressure of that it should lead to something. Like taking one step at a time. Here is somebody who says that not everything you do will amount to something, and that's okay. What's important is that you keep trying to maximize your chances at finding something that suits you. Exactly. Actually, as Owen said as well, you're here to learn, and that's the most important thing. Like I think Janet mentioned it as well. Sometimes the path in life is different than what you thought beforehand.
There was also this advisor comment, I think is very relevant to this, where they mention some things cannot be remedied. In some cases, you simply have to accept a shitty circumstance. You lost money, time, the thing, option, result you really wanted. And it's not fair and it feels awful. Most students already know this, but for those who don't, I think it can really help. Because when you admit to where you're at, it's much easier to come up with ways to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And that honestly, I think spoke to me on a deeper level, because sometimes, yes, you want to go and someone to give you advice or say, okay, you should do this. But at the same time, sometimes also internally, you know that there's nothing you can do, but you need an ear and like someone who listens to you, so you can just rant for a bit and then release, let go.
Yeah, there's a lot of advice from students who said seek someone to talk to. Here, for example, ask people for help. It doesn't matter how small the thing is, there's usually someone to help, or just venting to someone can already relieve pressure. It's actually what you said.
Yeah.
But students agree with you. Or you agree with students. That's just
yes, but also the study advisors, like there's a very huge link.
Yeah. Also someone says, reach out. You don't have to figure it all out by yourself. Others are there to support you. Like sometimes you feel like I need to do all this on my own. I need to come up with a solution myself. But that is not necessarily true. There are people around you. Having said that, if you feel like I don't have any people around me to talk to, you could try and seek professional help. Or if that's a step too far, there's also actually a Dutch service that I wanted to mention that maybe could help, which is called de Luisterlijn. Maybe I should spell it for you so you can Google it. It's spelled LUISTERLIJN. And then you can talk to volunteers. And if you want to, you can ask for a conversation in English. You can call, you can chat, you can email. And I think that's a very nice service to use.
Yes, honestly. Some of the advisors' comments where they said where you can reach out or seek like workshops that could be helpful. They say there are workshops and courses from the Student Service Center that students can find. There's the well-being portal on the student portal. There's the possibility to talk with academic advisor and confidential advisor, student counselors or student psychologists at the university. And there are support groups at the SSC and at FSE faculties as well, depending on also your own faculty.
And there was also one study advice, because I said maybe the step is too big to seek help. But maybe this comment from a study advisor can be a bit comforting, because there's one study advisor who says, we are not going to trivialize at all. We are here to support you and to make sure you can live up to your full potential. And also another study advisor said, there is help /advice /information for those who ask. You are not inconveniencing anyone by asking your question or by asking for help or just wanting to share what's bothering you. They're there.
Yeah. In relation to this, another advisor also says you could look at asking for help just as another important skill, such as working together, taking the lead,
yes,
etc., which is a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, I really like that one, because it's not a direct link, but I'm thinking about this, that you sometimes just need others
to start.
Yeah, and that is perfectly fine, and that is actually not a weakness.
Yes, because it definitely takes a lot of courage, like approaching someone, especially when you feel like you're alone.
Yeah, there are people around you. Talk to them, ask them for help.
Exactly. Additionally, one of the advisors also says that you could sometimes look back at the moments you were in distress and trace back and see how you solved it then. So that's how you also build resilience, by also reminding yourself of different emotions and steps you took in those situations where you previously felt like there was no way out, which I think sometimes we forget whenever we're in struggle at the present, like how we overcame the previous ones, and that we are strong.
And we also tend to forget how far we have actually already come.
Exactly.
We are already in this point of our lives, which can already be an accomplishment in itself.
It is.
You're doing well. You're doing great. You have come this far. Just remember that.
Yes.
Maybe to wrap up a bit, but because I think we have talked about quite a lot right now.
Yes.
I feel like we have talked about most things. There was actually one very nice comment of a student advisor that we both liked. We thought we can read it out to you. And
yes.
Okay, so here it is. In 10 years, you'll be looking back at this phase of your life thinking, did I really make such a big deal of my thesis? Did I really think that I was going to be the only one who would not be able to find a job after graduating? How could I think that choosing my minor would define the rest of my life? And funny how I ended up here. Because you can't predict life, you can assume that there's a very good chance that things will be fine.
Very beautiful. Honestly, when I read it, I really started thinking about how much pressure I give myself for some stuff that maybe are out of your control or do not really matter too much.
And sometimes things just happen to you.
Yes.
For example, there was both good and bad, unfortunately bad as well, but also good things. There are also good things that are gonna happen to you. Because when I read this comment, I thought of the time when I was looking for some kind of student job. And I had emailed several people, replied to several vacancies, and I got a no from everybody. And then suddenly, when I had just given up on finding this side job, I got an email from a professor who apparently liked how I behaved in class, and he had a master's student that had quit a project with him. And then he asked me to be on his project. And later I was also his student assistant. So then suddenly I had this side job, but it was just given to me.
Yeah.
And then I thought all these worries about not being able to get a side job, and then sometimes just something comes to you.
Yes, honestly. This also kind of reminds me of one other positive comment from a student. And since we're wrapping up, I think it would also be really nice to also on a positive note where they do mention how they were in such a position as well with universities, though universities exception and admission. They said, I'm grateful that the university accepted me as a student, even though my A-levels weren't perfect enough to study psychology in Germany. And I'm grateful that I got a spot in this master program that I wanted to do, even though I missed to do the assessment test. I like how you can almost always find a way to make things work. I really love my master's program and I appreciate the professors that teach us.
So basically, it's going to be fine.
Exactly.
In the end.
Yeah, you're not alone, and sometimes it might be harder than you want it to, but sometimes it just takes time as well.
There are people to help you either professionally or in your close environment. Sometimes the road to something can be hard, but
almost always.
I think Owen said every new thing you're going to do is the hardest thing you'll ever do.
Beautiful as well. Do you have any last remarks at this end of our podcast that you want to
I think that
in?
I just want to say that I really enjoyed doing this with you and doing it in general as well. Very interesting to speak to the guests.
Very enlightening, just talking with people about these topics.
Yeah, and I just also really hope that the people listening right now got something out of it.
Yes.
I sincerely hope so. And if you have not, then I hope you have enjoyed it. At least.
Exactly. For me as well, thank you for participating and doing this with me together. And then I again just wanted to mention how while doing this, it was very interesting to see that everyone is struggling, and even though sometimes you might look at someone or everyone at one point and be like, oh wow, they all have their lives put together, or they know what they're doing, they have this amazing study routine, etc. This may not always be true, so never be afraid to share.
Yeah.
So to anyone's listening, please, if you struggle, please say so. And I think that could also make other people more relaxed, where they also feel free enough to also share their struggles and not keep up certain appearances as in, oh, I have everything in my life put together, because that may not always be true.
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. There, we have mentioned it before, but there was one comment. I really love that comment. It said, if you feel the pressure of not being at the same level as your classmates, look at their hands when they present. I bet they are shaking too. I mean, I know I mentioned it before.
Yes,
but
I
I loved it because it's true, and it perfectly fits with what you said.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for now, I think the last thing we want to do is thank people.
Exactly. Show our gratitude.
We want to thank the respondents of the questionnaire.
Yeah, both students and study advisors.
Yes.
They're amazing and super helpful for our project.
And then we want to say thanks to our guests. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Wally. Thank you, Janet.
Yes.
It was amazing having you on.
Yes.
And also thanks to Steven for supervising us.
Yes.
And then thank you for listening.
To everyone, thanks for the support.
And
that's it for now.
That's it, guys. Bye-bye.